Welcome to ICS Arabia. Today's episode is about pharmaceutical, about the drugs we use daily in health industry. It's very important. This is my first episode about pharmaceutical industry with my guest Andre Froneman. Hey Andre, what's up?
Dr. Suleiman, it's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us about yourself and what do you do and how did you end up in the OT security or OT?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Suleiman. Look, my journey with industrial started around 2012 when I went to Ministry of Defense in Oman. Really, the first point of contact was doing cybersecurity architecture. But fundamentally, they had gas generation and they had Muscat municipality infrastructure. They had massive building management system infrastructure, which all runs on admin, right? So there was a big challenge from a military perspective to kind of make sure that we put best practices into this area. And you know that the military has a standard, and then there's industry standard, and then there's just operational standard in the Middle East. So that's kind of my first exposure to how important something like a building management system can be. In South Africa, if an aircon goes off, it's no big deal. In the Middle East, if the president and the Ministry of Defense is having a meeting in the building and the aircon goes off, it's a different story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the criticality about building management in regard to OT was kind of highlighted to me in that area. From there, I came back to South Africa and I predominantly worked for OEMs like Juniper. I worked for big integrators like Datacentrix, where I am now, but predominantly focusing on OT visibility. This is Nozomi, Dragos, Forescout OT, Cisco CyberVision. The stuff that gives the customer that primary first set of asset inventory and end of life, end of support, vulnerable firmware, just that view area, but also pretty involved in the industrial networking, industrial Wi-Fi, and but predominantly pre-sales and architecture. That's been my predominant role from 2012 onwards. Before that, I was IT, server, data center storage, and all of that. So I don't have a industrial or a process control background, right?
Okay.
Then fundamentally, in the last 3 years, is actually when this started getting interesting, because now the company where I am now, we started up an OT practice. The company has got 1,300 employees. All of them know how to sell laptops. All of them know how to sell cloud, but very difficult for them to capitalize on industrial markets, big mining, big automotive, big pharma, municipality, and government, right? So now for the last 3 years, we've been cutting our teeth with Cisco, and this is they call it IoT, but it's industrial, right? Industrial routing, switching, Cisco CyberVision, secure equipment access, how to get engineers to engage their OT assets safely. Cyolo, which is our secure remote platform of choice, that works quite well for our remote access. And then actually services. I've got 2 people sitting at a big tire company, and this guy is a PLC programmer. He's there to assist during downtime. And it's customers don't want technology if they don't get the help to implement it, right? But that's been my journey to kind of get from architect in the Middle East into exposure to Nozomi when they came into the country. OT wasn't really a big thing, now it's becoming big, but that time, 2015, 2016, no one actually knew that there was a need for this. And that's kind of been my journey up until, where I am now. Yeah.
Okay. So where do you work now? At Datacentrix, right?
Datacentrix, yes.
Datacentrix.
Yeah. So I work as an architect within our OT practice. I've got a OT engineer that helps me out with the POCs and some of the technical bits, and then we've got a commercial lead. So really, we've been quite successful positioning our services into pharma, positioning our services into automotive, and then also, as I said, mining has been a very strong economical growth for us in the last year or so. After the Trump tariffs and all of the kind of the economic problems, they've been very resilient. But pharma's doing quite well as well. We've been building our pharma competence for also the last 3 years, and that's an exciting market to be in. We'll cover some of the challenges and some of the the opportunity there, but it's a privilege to be in South Africa. I mean, we're the marketing hub of Africa. There's some good manufacturing happening in Ethiopia, some good manufacturing happening in Egypt, maybe a little bit in Morocco. But South Africa predominantly has a big manufacturing base, which is good for OT professionals,
Oh, okay, cool. So tell us about the pharmaceutical industry. Are you working with them still?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, I mean, so when if I can take you maybe as an example of the operational constraints between the three different verticals, right? So from a mining perspective, you have very high value assets which are distributed across location, right? And what this means is you would have things that you wouldn't think were connected, like a mining shaft or like a ventilation shaft. And these are very high impact devices. If you get into an ICS network through IT or through remote access, whatever the case might be, and you shut down the fans or the ventilation fans, 6,000 people die. It's like it's finished. It's like it's a high impact asset, which if you do an asset visibility scan with Nozomi, Nozomi won't pick it up as a high value asset. You need to understand the mining competence for you to be able to see that, right? But that's really boots on the ground. It's very distributed. It takes a long time for you to get a baseline of how to secure that customer. Automotive is quite unique because it's under one building, and you've got building management, CCTV, access control, thermal cameras, and the process network in one area, right? Very condensed. And then pharma follows a very similar methodology where most of the machines are under one roof, but then you've got different segments of that specific customer, right? So one would be doing tablets, one would be doing like vials, other one will be doing pain medications. Just different segments of these buildings, and it's highly the PPE that you have to wear. You have to change from one level to another level to another level to another level. So you end up as a process engineer or OT guy changing your clothes 3 or 4 times just for one project, But the biggest difference between pharma and I guess my other customers is compliance, right? If a pharmaceutical company gets a contract to make certain tablets, they have to comply with the company and the country that originates the work orders. So say it's a company in Brazil, right? But they get components from America. Now they have to do Brazilian compliance, they have to do American FDA compliance, and they have to do general compliance for EU if they export to the EU, and then there's South African compliance, right? And that's normally South African compliance normally follows IEC 62443. There's no official industry standard, but 62443 seems to be the best guideline in our customer base. So the big differentiator is compliance. Every single work order, every single robot, every single machine is intrinsically linked to a piece of compliance that says every single process needs to be signed off, needs to be visible, and needs to be validated from a data perspective, right? And this is a challenge. A lot of our pharmaceutical customers have plants that are quite old. So predominantly, a lot of our work is just connecting those machines. Some of them have a little industrial PC. That's easy. Some of them I have to add a network module on the PLC. Predominantly, it's going to be Siemens. And some of them are field bus. And this is a different story, right? To convert field bus into IP and then get it over the network. And predominantly, the pharma customers don't like Wi-Fi, right? It's the way that the buildings are made. There's not a lot of scope for Wi-Fi. So it all ends up being copper connectivity, a lot of edge requirement and so forth. But really, the big pressure points is compliance. The FDA's got CFR, the EU's got GMP, and as I said, the originating source of the work order has their compliance as well. So whereas if you take maybe an automotive customer, they only need compliance for where they export the vehicle. So say you export a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW to Europe, you have UNICE compliance that you have to take care about, nothing else. But pharma is different, 3 different countries of compliance that they need to contend with. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's a bit complicated in the pharmaceutical industry because they're dealing with different countries, like you said, sometimes, and they have to comply with each. And does this include complying in terms of cybersecurity as well for each different country, or it doesn't
absolutely,
matter?
No. So data management, data protection, and cybersecurity are the 3 overlaying trends that is baked into all of these compliance areas. So definitely it is. Yeah. And
Oh,
and that
okay.
becomes a difficult topic when it becomes to supply chain, right?
All
Because
right.
even though you can protect your factory, I mean, I'm considered a contractor, right? So how do you protect yourself against contractors, against vendors, against machine builders, against software OEMs, people that put things in the plant, right? So that supply chain security is a big issue for them to navigate, because they can protect themselves. It's very difficult to protect, companies that are coming into your organization that manage, operational technology.
Mm, got it. And you just said you're dealing with many old devices in the pharmacy. You find many of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if the plant was built, say, um, less than, say, 5 years ago, then you would predominantly see that the plant is heavily digitized, right? It's probably got Wi-Fi, probably got Ethernet. The networking is normally Hirschman, sometimes Rockwell, but predominantly Hirschman. And anything older than that is a struggle, and then so what happens is the robot suppliers like Fanuc or Kuka, they will go to the customer and say, we now have this software like ZDT or management software, but the software sits in the data center and it needs to see these robots. Now that by itself is a challenge, because
Mm,
sometimes these OT cells don't even speak to the data center, right?
mm,
So they don't have condition monitoring, they don't have performance optimization, they don't have cloud access. You have to digitize first before those become realized. Still manual work orders where you just get a printout, and the printout goes to the beginning of the production line and it just follows process through. So yeah,
mm.
anything older than 5 years, I think, is quite a challenge to first digitize before you have
Yeah.
value discussions with the customer. Yeah.
And you just mentioned a point. I mean, the OT network is also accessible to the corporate network. I mean, for the SOC you just mentioned, is it
Not not
accessible?
not a lot.
Mm,
Look, I mean, so from our perspective, when we speak to customers, right, as an organization, I normally
mm.
speak around three different layers. I talk around visibility, and this
Yes.
visibility is like you would know OT visibility, right? It's like putting down the cyber vision, it's putting down technology that kind of crawls that network and looks what happens, right?
Mm,
But our organization also does visual and thermal inspection, right? So we give you visibility in the visual range and the thermal range, and we can look at a robot or a PC or a machine, and we can tell you if it's going to fail based on the thermal signature of that machine, right? So that
mm,
visibility also links to electrical metering and ESG. And ESG is a big thing for us. So really giving the customer all the way from cyber visibility to visual visibility to electrical ESG visibility, right? That's the first pane of glass that we speak to customers with. The second
mm.
thing is zero trust. How do we build
Oh,
secure remote access? How do we build industrial firewall so that you can conduit and you can zone and you can look at traffic east west, and how do you overlay all of that according to 62443 or to some standard, right? And then the final thing that we speak to customers about is how do we take some of the best practices in IT and overlay it in your production network. Let's back up the HMIs. Let's put antivirus on the HMIs. Okay, HMIs running Windows 7, Windows
mm,
XP, right?
mm.
HMI is also running Siemens. So you can't just put any antivirus on there. The antivirus needs to be certified on Siemens. It needs to be certified on Rockwell. And also, it needs not to close your production software. If the thing is doing something funny. So you really need something like a TX1 Stella or something that's built for old operating systems and built for engineering software, right? Then we say,
Mm,
okay, how do you do version control for PLCs? How do you
mm,
do backups? How do you do restores, right? And then so that PLC value proposition fits nicely into our strategy where we take visibility, we take zero trust architecture, and we take automation as a combined effort to the customer. Now, we can't do any of these things, right, if the customer doesn't have an IP overlay. I need to be able to speak in an IP format to that device. Now, what we've ended up doing is if a customer has 30 OT zones and he's got the data center, it makes more sense for us to put an edge industrial PC inside the OT zone, right?
mm,
And this PC runs Ubuntu maybe, and it runs a
mm.
virtual machine or a container for Cisco CyberVision. It runs a
Oh,
container for Cyolo remote access, right?
okay.
It runs another container for log collection and security event collection. And
Mm,
that one device speaks to the data center and speaks to the SOC, right?
Oh.
Because I tell you why, all of these robots and all of these machines have the same IP addresses. So you can't open up the network because there's a netting problem, right? Either you need to buy a very expensive firewall and put it between those devices in your data center, right? Just to do net translation so that you can have a one-to-one translation. But if you've got more than 256 robots, then what do you do then? That becomes a problem. So it's better for us to be able to deploy a piece of hardware. That hardware is running 4 or 5 different services, and this complies with 5 of the big 62443 controls, right? This one device. Some of these OT zones do speak to the data center, yes, and that's easy. We just put a CyberVision server or a remote access server or whatever service we want to dispense to the customer in the data center, and it accesses that OT zone. But not a lot. I must say, in the pharma industry, what I've seen so far is that that's not a common appearance.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, why does the OT device has to speak to the data center? For what reason?
Look, if you have invested millions of dollars into equipment, and your KPI as a asset owner is the quality or the volume of the project that gets out the other side, right? If you connect up these machines and you incorporate them into a MES or into a Viva Historian or into a big data platform that can give you predictive maintenance, and it can give you maybe even in-shift optimization if it's very advanced, right? Or it can give you process optimization. These are very big margin accelerating functions that the customer can attain, but that requires connectivity and normally requires cloud connectivity, right? All of the value, like even the PLC backups on our cloud-based, you can have Octoplant on-prem, but I mean, the value, all of the next level, like cutting edge vendors are all cloud-based, right? So our venture is eventually to get that factory fully cloud connected with one-way traffic. That's the vision, right? One way out. But some factories that are quite modern are completely cloud connected. Right? Some the older ones are never, but some of the new customers are reckoning that if they do their security right, having 100% cloud connectivity is no problem. Right? If you don't do your security right, then it's a big problem. Then any connection is a big problem,
Yeah. Also, you mentioned something about the robotics. So they have robotics, right? In the pharmaceutical.
Yeah. Look, so there's a predominantly from a packaging perspective, right? So when you take so when you take the process of, say, creating a tablet, right? You would have a powder, you would have a compressing mechanism, you would have a cutting or a curing mechanism, and then there's like a process for drying or for that then goes into the packaging requirement. Now, if you think about packaging, this packaging is almost the same as you would see with food and bev, right? It's almost similar. So you've got the same type of machine builders and the same type of processes and methodologies there. You've got cameras looking at the quality of the device. And we specialize in these thermal and visual cameras. So this is quite interesting for us to be able to look at a tablet and see what temperature it is, because if it's the wrong temperature to go into the next process, then there's a quality problem, and also to do automatic counting. And, in South Africa, in January, February, and March, 390,000 people lost their jobs.
Wow, because of the robotics.
Well, because of them losing their jobs, robotics is back. So if you go to my customers and you read their financial statements and you go into their factory, a lot of the people that do get moved out of the business are replaced with robotics. They don't bring the robots first. It's just economic pressure that kind of forces customers into doing things differently, And we've got we've got a very interesting robotics competence in South Africa. We've got KUKA, we've got Fanuc, and we've got customers all the way from the automotive industry is big in robotics, right? And then pharma has it on the packaging side, food and bev also big on the packaging side. But it's a very mature market. We can compete with some of the big Western countries on robotics implementation.
Wow, I didn't know that South Africa is popular with robots.
Yes, we are.
Well, robots are kicking everybody's job, huh?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But look,
Oh,
someone still needs to secure the robot, and someone still needs to maintain the robot, and someone needs to
uh,
do backup of the code of the robot. So for
so
me, it's
so
the opportunity, you know.
do you include them in the inventory, the asset inventory as well, the robots?
Absolutely, yeah. So normally, what would happen is
Yes.
the robot would be the robot would be connected to a hub, and it would normally be connected to something like a Stratix or a Siemens switch, right? Or it
Oh,
would be connected to a robotic controller, and the robotic controller will be connected to this OT-based switch. So when
oh.
we interrogate HMIs, we interrogate PLCs, we interrogate robots, and if the machine in the process is smart enough, it's got a controller not linked to the PLC, we pick that up as well. Then, of course, we have to talk about IoT and printers and
Yeah.
scanners and smart tools and CCTV and all of these
Mm.
things sitting in and around the manufacturing line, which no one does pen test on. You know, the OT guys don't touch it, the IT guys don't touch it, and admin passwords are admin, and sometimes managed by a controller sitting outside of your business. And to get
Mm.
from one VLAN to another VLAN is child's play for hackers. You know, so those are things that are quite important for us. We need to make sure that we see the OT network, but we also see all the things happening around it. And I guess that's good opportunity for us because not a lot of contractors look at that area.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. You just said earlier that robots they have one IP, right? They-
Yeah. Normally they
Yeah,
have one IP for the robot, one for the controller.
yeah.
But I mean, our customers that we have run like 100, 200, 300, 400 robots. The problem that we have with these IPs is that normally the IPs are the same. You know, 192, 168,
Oh, they're the
110.
same.
And then
They-
the robot on the neck OT zone is also 192, 168.
so
Yeah.
all the robots they have the same IP. Wow.
No. When the customers do the configuration,
Ah,
sometimes they leave it with the same IP schema, and then there's duplicates across all of these robot lines. Now you have to set it up, so it doesn't come with the default. You set it up, but just I
ah.
don't know why the customers have done this. I don't know if it's for ease or for I don't know, but I find that a lot. You know that there's these different OT zones have very similar IP ranges. It becomes a really big problem. You know.
Wow. So I mean, the pharma factory, it has a big attack surface, from what
Yeah.
I understood from you, because you said
Yeah.
IoTs, the cameras, the robots. It's
Absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
a big
Look,
mix.
if we think about the hot topic engagements of getting inside one of our customers,
Mm.
normally it's remote access, right? There's a
Oh,
jump server. The jump server, you take VNC or RDP, you get your engineering workstation. The engineering
oh,
workstation has a little file called password.txt on it, and that's the
oh,
password for TIA Portal for Siemens, right? So,
okay.
so if you go and you just go on LinkedIn and you look at all of the people that work at a certain pharma customer, and then you go on the dark web and you look at all of the leaked credentials from Sony or
Yeah.
from Amazon, you choose who that is, you could probably guess or get into that network using a username and password, a valid username and
Wow.
password. I'm not saying it's easy, it's doable, right?
That's
So,
doable, huh?
yeah, and I mean, if you look at what happened to ABB got hacked, got ransomware, and all of their contractors' usernames and passwords for their remote access contracts are still somewhere in the dark web. So you can't even trust a contractor or an OEM or a supply chain partner to be safe, right? And they all have access to your network, right? Even me as a contractor, if I want to install remote access, I get VPN from the customer, right? I get multi-factor authentication from the customer. Then I'm inside the customer's data center. Then I have to create a virtual machine, and then I have to link that to the OT center. That's just me, but there's many other contractors like me. So
Mm.
that security for that supply chain is really important. So remote access, that's the key. We put down technology that it enables you to do multi-factor authentication. It allows you to do session recording. It allows you to take a identity and a robot or a identity and a PLC and match the two so that when you come in, we know it's Andre, and Andre can only speak to this device. He can't do lateral movement on the engineering workstation, and he can't do lateral movement on the DMZ. And maybe even if he's got server infrastructure, he can't do lateral movement on the server infrastructure. That's quite important. So that's the entry point. The second biggest entry point is IoT, right?
Okay.
Let's take CCTV as example. I wrote some articles on my LinkedIn on CCTV, how easy it is to do max spoofing or double tagging to get from one VLAN to another VLAN, right? Now, why is this important? You can go on census, or you could go to Shodan and you can say, Hikvision, South Africa. You can see all
Yeah.
of the open cameras in South Africa
Yeah.
with exploits, right? Not saying that all customers have internet-facing cameras, but because they outsource their security to different companies, those companies have very bad security policies, procedures, compliance, right? And then so it's very easy for you to take that weak link and get into the CCTV network. Over and above the intellectual property. Now, with CCTV, you can see the process, you can sell that data to a competitor. But you can also get from one VLAN to another VLAN, which means you can probably get from CCTV VLAN to access control VLAN. All right, now I can start shutting doors and I can open doors. And this sounds like a small thing. But if you work in a pharma environment, all zones from one area where you come in to the cleaning area to the maintenance area are all locked by access control, right? Can't get in, can't get out without the right procedures and policies and the PPE and all of that, right? So just imagine you shut down access control for 1 day at a plant. Everything, nothing opens, nothing closes. I mean, at the Araya Hotel in Las Vegas, that happened, right? They hacked the hotel and access control wasn't working, and people couldn't get in and out of the rooms, couldn't get water, no access to to food. It's a really big problem. But so remote access is the first point of entry, and then IoT, CCTV access control, building management. That's the second point of contact, and then the third point of contact is supply chain, right? This is someone selling you something, and they don't follow your security protocols and procedures, and that weak link is used to get into your environment. I think those are the 3 weak points we see in our pharma customers.
Wow. And from your perspective, are the pharma customers, are they mature now, or they still in terms of security, or they still lacking?
No, look, so that depends on the customer.
Yeah.
Predominantly my customer, look, so predominantly my customers have a good understanding of what needs to happen, right? When sometimes out of pharma, we speak to a customer, he says, listen, I love what you're saying, I don't know where to start, right? So even though he can read 62443 and he can listen to everything I say, he doesn't know where to start. Now, pharma is lucky because I spoke about the compliance, right? The FDA compliance and then the European compliance. That already gives a guideline of a basic cybersecurity sanity that needs to be followed, right? Like rules and guidelines. So at the very least, those things are normally in place, right? Which is more than I can say for other verticals, So at least they've got the basics right. But because of the machines being legacy, because of the digitization process, which is now happening for them to press their margins, these things are all becoming a little bit risky, right? How do I digitize safely? And how do I connect these old machines safely? That's where the risk is coming in currently. But I would say that they've got a very high understanding of cybersecurity because of the level of compliance that they have to adhere to,
Okay. So what I understood, what you're saying, if they mix or digitize and bring the new technologies, and there are legacy ones at the same time, so they expose the legacy one more than before.
Exactly, because the threat vector or the attack surface probably was just one plant. Now it's all of the plants, right? And also, it's like when you think about patching and you think about CVEs, and I mean, you can't go to a OT customer or production customer just to patching. There's planning, and then you have to look at if the MES is going to accept it, and then you have to look if there's any auxiliary technologies or code or databases that need to, and then so just a simple thing like patching is very challenging, right? And then if you can't patch, how do you virtual patch? Oh, I have to buy an expensive firewall, right? And then so these legacy machines come with that challenge. They can't be modified. You can read the telemetry from it, but you can't really change that PLC. PLC is 25 years old, 20 years old. So you can maybe get data out of it, but you can't change it, and that I think is a bit of a challenge.
I got it. So, I mean, do pharma customers say we are air gapped? Did you hear that before?
Oh, all my customers say they're air gapped. There is no such thing. Yeah. Look, I mean, I've been working in nuclear facilities. I've been working in energy facilities. I've been working in so many facilities. There's no such thing as air gapped, right? There's always an engineer that plugs in a little USB key, makes his own private hotspot, right? Maybe even operators watching Netflix on Raspberry Pi HMIs in the middle of the night, right? It's like, it's true, right? So company policy says air gap. Reality is there's no such thing, And I mean, when I go to factories, I've got my little M5. This is a little hacking gadget where you can look at Wi-Fi and you can do de-authentication, stuff like that. Because mostly you can't take in a phone or a laptop. It's very difficult to sign in. So as I walk through the factory, I can just scan for wireless as I walk. As soon as I pick up a wireless, then I know, someone is having a local access point here, and then I can understand there's a problem, But so customers think they are air gap because of the way they architect the network but practically the people that manage those assets and that work night shift and they have to fix things because the production line is down, they open up areas of connection that sometimes it's permanent, sometimes it's not permanent, and it's not their fault. They need to get production up, right? They get pressure. They lose millions every second that the plant is down, so they'll do anything to get the plant up and running. And those are the weak spots that take this air gap process completely away.
So I mean, the people are causing the problems and bringing the threats to the pharma. Normally, it's the people.
Absolutely. Look, the technology. Yeah, sorry, man.
Yeah, and what about other threats other than the people in the pharma? The major threats.
Look, I mean, so from our perspective in South Africa, it's geopolitical, right? So if I mean, you can imagine that the Chinese and the Russians are actively exercising their capabilities on our electrical infrastructure and on our industrial customers, right? This is a known fact.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
The Western world is doing the same, right? And then so this becomes a very big challenge because it's commercial in nature, right? So they would want to get into the pharma company to get intellectual property. That's the first thing. But also if they eat ransomware, they'll get money. Because remember, pharmaceutical companies have a very rich balance sheet, right? So if you can hit and you close the whole factory with ransomware, you can get millions of dollars, right? So there's a big incentive for them to do that. So I guess ransomware and data theft are the two big things that we see being attacked. Over and above the people, that's caused by geopolitics and by threat actors, effectively,
Interesting. I mean, I didn't know that South Africa was the playground for major hackers, advanced APTs to exercise in South Africa. I didn't know that, especially on the pharma industry. Wow.
Yeah. We don't have very strong compliance. We don't have very strong intelligence. We don't have. Our South African cyber investigative units like 2 people, right? And they are undertrained, understaffed. So it's easy for these guys to come play here, and there's no repercussion as such,
How many pharma factories in South Africa?
Oh, there's many. There's more than 20. Yeah. And this is from different ranges. So where I stay in the Eastern Cape, we've got a few big ones, right? And this is the top 3. You'll probably know them. It's international. Then in Cape Town, we've got about another five, which is a little bit smaller. And Johannesburg, we've got another 10 or so, which are really, really big factories. Yeah. So it's quite a healthy industry for South Africa. It's a good contribution to our GDP.
All right. And from your visits to these pharma industries, did they have like a CISO for or OT, chief OT security, or they don't have?
No. So currently the responsibility is with the IT CISO. Yeah. So look, in automotive, right? They've got a CISO and a PISO, a plant information security officer, right? And this is normally, maybe it's one guy with 2 roles, but there's a focus on production. In pharma, most of my customers have the normal IT CISO, and he is responsible for the cybersecurity component. But most of my projects are with the process engineers, right? Guys that want remote access, guys that want PLC backups, guys that want to do it securely, right? And it's a Trojan horse, I give the customer remote access, but I fix so many of the security problems while I do it. You know what I mean? So it's like security is not the lead. It's like remote access is the lead, but security is the consequence of that project. Yeah.
Oh,
Because
nice.
sometimes if you go to process engineers and you go to operators and you talk about cybersecurity, they don't care. When I have an OT meeting, the people come in, they say, "Oh, I thought this is overtime. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come. OT overtime."
Oh man,
Yeah, so they don't care about
overtime, huh?
security. Yeah, overtime. They come to the
OT
meeting
stands
and
for overtime, huh?
overtime.
Nice one. I never heard this before.
Yeah, that's how I get most of my
Overtime.
meetings.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay, and you talked about the IP and the recipe for pharma industries. Whose responsibility normally is this? Is it the IT CISO or from your experience?
The intellectual property.
Yeah, the recipes and everything.
Yeah, that is normally with
Yeah.
the CISO. Um,
Mm,
Look, it's quite interesting because what happens is there's two different pharma methodologies in South Africa. We
mm,
don't really do a lot of development, like so we won't make we won't take the researchers and the engineers to come up with the recipe. That's done by the
yeah.
Americans. It's done in India. It's done in
Oh
Europe.
yeah.
And so they will send us the recipe, and we
Okay.
make it for them. Right? So contracting manufacturers. Right? We get a contract. The recipe is already designed and tested and whatever, and we
Okay.
make that for them. Right. So that's why I
Okay.
said the supply chain problem is a really big problem, right? Because that recipe now sits at two different locations from source, and it sits at the plant, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
and then so that but that intellectual property, the CISO is responsible to make sure that is safe. You're right.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same here in Kuwait. I mean, we have a pharmaceutical factory, and they got the recipes like you mentioned. Sometimes from some of the recipes they get them from outside, but some of them they have their own. So
Okay. Yeah,
it,
makes
it
sense.
depends
Yeah.
on it depends on the product. Yes.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
and do I mean are the IT CISOs, are they flexible to work with you? I mean, if you are implementing or the
Mm,
other or vice versa, the OT people, are they flexible
yeah,
to
I find most of the process engineers and the plant
Mm,
managers and the asset owners quite flexible,
okay.
because like I said, if I go to a operator, I always speak about a project which is tangible to his life, right?
Mm,
I speak about remote access because it's easier for him to access that thing from home and from office and from, because remember, when I speak about remote access, I'm talking about anything that touches the OT zone. So that means you can be in the office in the same building, but I still classify you as a remote access because you're going from IT into OT. So
mhm.
it's not, you don't have to be outside of the organization, right? So, but when you sell the customer something like this, it touches his operation, which he's happy about. If you sell him version control, right, for PLCs, it's something that touches his life because he can quickly restore, quickly get out of but the back-end infrastructure and policies and procedures that's required to do that strengthens his security, right? So normally the CISO doesn't have a problem with that. When you
Mhm.
want to implement, when you have a digitization project where you take old machines and old robots and you give them IP addresses over field bus, then the CISO needs to be 100% part of that discussion, right? Because there's edge switches, distribution switches, there's VLANs, security policies, and all of these things, factory acceptance testing
Yeah.
documents, and as builds, and all these things that needs to flow upwards to him.
Mhm.
So for the security and the networking components, definitely the IT teams have a very big input.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it. Uh, and what about you said you use the IEC 6244
Mm.
the double
Yeah.
four three standard, and it's commonly used in South Africa, like you said, right? Especially in the pharma. Do you think the standard works well with the pharma industry? Is it mature enough to secure these the pharma industry? That's
Yeah,
my
I think so because I mean, as I
yeah.
said, from a former perspective, there is already some baseline security guidelines from the FDA and from the European Union,
Mm.
and that's just baseline. Then what 62443 does is it digs deeper, roles and
Yeah.
responsibility and awareness training and life cycle management, all the way up to kind of component hardening, right? And zoning and conduiting and all that. So it's very complementary to the existing pharma cybersecurity legislation that they have to abide by. So it works quite well for us. Yes. Sometimes it's quite difficult to, engineers come to me and they say, okay, the first thing we need to do is conducting and zoning. I'm like, hey, Habibi, this is the most difficult thing. We have to first test how these things speak to each other, and then it's the most difficult thing to do if it's brownfield. If it's greenfield, no problem. You can put a conduit and you can put a zone, and PLC 1 speaks to PLC 2. But if it's an existing environment, it's really dangerous for you to cut network connectivity, just to create the conduit or zone. There's a lot of work that goes into it, right? So we focus on secure remote access. We focus on user management. We focus on lifecycle management, asset management, inventory, and roles, processes, and responsibilities, right? So from 62443, we have easy things that make high impact. And then the more difficult things needs more planning and takes a little bit more time.
So you don't really focus much on the architecture and secure architecture, stuff like that.
No, we do, because if we build remote access capability into the customer, right? So say I've got a data center virtual machine, and I now need to speak to my edge device, which is sitting in that OT zone. It's not just the link that opens, right? I need to get security policies approved. I need to get the architectural documents approved. I have to put in the as-built documentation to the security team. So yeah, architecture plays a pretty big role in how we navigate the customers. It's quite important, because there's network diagrams from the OT teams, right? And then there's network diagrams from the IT teams. Never they shall meet. So it's kind of bringing that data together in one place. And that's what we want to use our projects for, is to give the customer a better view of what's happening in that area, right?
Okay. And when you first joined or started to work with the pharma factories, did you find it challenging to do your job as a security guy? I mean, did you have to learn the learning curve? Was it okay? Was it smooth ride when you joined or did you?
Dr. Solomon, I think that's a really good question. We spoke a little bit earlier about this. Everyone is an OT specialist until they bring the factory down. So my comment on this is that even if I've got one customer in pharma, right, it takes me 6 to 12 months to operationally understand that customer for me to be able to add value from a OT or ICS perspective. And I'm just being honest, right? If you go to any pharma customer and you just walk in there and you say asset inventory and cyber risk profiling and incident response, and you don't even know if it's possible. You don't know how many assets are connected. You don't know enough of that business, So the learning curve for me at any customer is quite long, right? I have to be on the shop floor. I have to meet the operators. I need to understand how they procure materials, how they compress it, what the machines are, who's the asset owners. A lot of the times these assets aren't owned by the customer, right? Oh, I want to do cybersecurity. Oh, this machine is owned by a company in Europe, right? You can't. It's like you don't have access to the PLC code. You don't have access to IP. It's got a little VPN box that speaks directly to the internet. You can't even see the traffic, So these are all small and complicated things that you only notice when you are in the factory and speaking to the different asset owners as you move along. So for me personally, and it might be a weak point, but I take a lot of time to get to know the customer's processes before I kind of try and dot technology or processes or services in. But I think from a learning curve perspective, the PPE that's required to move between the zones is a bit challenging. But it's nice, it's clean, it's cold. I like that. When I'm in the automotive factories, hey man, you're sweating. It's like walking 10 kilometers from one area to it's like a difficult environment to work in. With pharma's nice and cold and controlled area. Generally, the operators are quite nice and receptive to you opening a machine, looking at the panel, taking photos of the PLC, the open ports. Sometimes this is not so easy with some customers, right? They're very protective about their assets. But it's also understanding, maybe you open the panel and it stops the process. Maybe it's got a sensor in, so it's all these things you only find out as you go along. But I think from a learning perspective, it's all about learning what compliance, who's their customers that are selling them the intellectual property so that they can develop, what their external markets are that they sell to, and how cybersecurity is affected by local regulation, those regulation, and then what the threat vectors are in the country, which is important to mitigate.
Nice tip. I mean, because when I read your title in LinkedIn, it kind of made me laugh when you said under your name, hard hater of OT cybersecurity.
But you can see I don't have nice hair, so if I put my hat on, it's okay, you know.
Yeah, I mean, people normally they are, they say, "Wow, OT cybersecurity expert." They like, okay, okay, but
Don't leave
you just
home
you
without it,
just said you said something nobody said before. Hard hater.
Yeah,
What do
I
you
got that
hate?
from a. Yeah. No, it's hard hatter, like a hat. Hard hatter. Ah, I think you're on mute, huh? Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Suleiman.
Yeah, the hatter. You mean
Yeah,
just show me?
the hat. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I actually had a very interesting podcast with a lady that had a similar tag, and I was so intrigued by it. A lady in America has got her own company that does PLC backups and stuff like that. I can't get the name now, but yeah, it's good, man. It's like I don't have the hair to walk around, so putting my hard hat on is actually quite nice, you know. And look, safety is the number one thing, right? In South Africa, you need safety files. You need to work at heights. You need all of these things, and you have to do it over and over and over and over again. So wearing the PPE and wearing the hard hat's mandatory, you know.
Yeah,
And that is a big challenge, Dr. Solomon. You know, the students and the children of today, they don't want to work in a factory. Yeah, they don't want to get themselves dirty. They don't want to do work in that setting. They want to do everything remotely, like DevOps. And this is a really big challenge when it comes to skills development into pharma and also holding skills. You know, when you take a process engineer or OT specialist and you build him up over time, over 5 years he's gone. You know, he moves to Europe or he moves to America or he moves to somewhere where there's more money and, you know, less problems. You know, so skill is a really big problem for pharma, for automotive, for mining in South Africa specifically. You know.
Yeah, because the salaries are higher in Europe, like you said.
Yeah,
that's why they're leaving, and it would be challenged in the future. Yes, it would be challenged in the future because we need the young people to join the forces, but there won't be many, like you said.
Yeah, they used to doing. If you look at the PLC backups, we work with a few vendors in that space, but it's DevOps for PLC. Right, so even the OEMs and the vendors are becoming like DevOps orientated, DevSecOps orientated, right? So when these students come out of university, they're used to working on the laptop. They used to work maybe they've got an electrical trade, right? But they want to be able to work comfortable in an office, air conditioner, and do remote work. But you know, practically, if the plant goes down, sometimes there's no connectivity to that zone. Sometimes there's no connectivity to the plant. You have to get on the airplane, get in the car, drive there. Sometimes you have to take a 500 or 150 meter cable and plug the cable in one place and just run it over the factory floor to plug it in another place just to get production up and running, right? So it's very difficult to do these remote things from a maintenance perspective. Maybe you can do upgrades, maybe you can do small things, you know, but predominantly you need to be there. And working in OT is a people thing, right? It's not as much about the systems. It's about getting the trust from the asset owners, getting the trust from the CISO and from the plant manager. And that trust is only realized if you at the plant many times. People see you, you know, the security guard knows your name. You can come into the plant. You already have all of the stuff you need, the cards and so forth. That is a people's thing. And it's very difficult for people to build trust online. And that's why the students, I think, are going to have a hard time to get into pharma, to get into automotive, to get into these areas because it's difficult for them to build trust online, you know?
Okay. So what you're saying is, do you think OT security is hard?
Or difficult? It's different. Look, I mean, I've been in security for a very long time, and security is ever evolving, right? It's like I don't want to become political, but I mean, when we had this problem with COVID, people were saying trust the science, right? But science also develops over time, right? So it's an ever changing thing, and cyber is similar. It's ever changing. Now, if I look at OT, the technology might be old, right?
Yeah.
But cybersecurity is ever changing.
It's great.
Stuxnet, Petya, all of these things are ever changing. So that's what I like. I like always on my laptop, I've got my virtual machines, I've got my Cisco Cyber Vision, I can probe and I can ping and I can do customer demos and scan the environments, and it's always learning. And this learning, I think, is important to me. I would not like to have a job where I think I know everything. That won't be fun.
I spoke to one of my guests. He works in the food industry, and he said normally food industry, they don't have a test environment. What about pharma? Is it the same?
Same, yeah. Look, I mean, so we spoke about cloud a little bit earlier, right? And hopefully the adoption of cloud will change the people's mindset about having Q&A and test and dev environments. Because currently, if I have to do maintenance on a Viva Historian, right, as an example, right?
Okay.
So we do maintenance on historians for customers, right? Then the obvious question is, if I want to upgrade a license or if I want to upgrade something, where's my test environment that I do it? No, there's no test environment. Okay, so now we do it in production. Now I have to wait 1 week for a scheduled shut, and then at that scheduled shut, then maybe it's over a Sunday. The people that supports us are not open. The license fails. You only know Monday morning when they put the equipment on again, right? Because when the equipment comes on and it doesn't stream to the historian, the process breaks down. So this is a big challenge. The fact that there's no Q&A environments is a really big challenge. But this is a very common thing in South Africa, not just in pharma, in some of my other customers as well. I'd like them to fix it, but also very difficult. If you think about it, how do you build a test and dev or QA environment without losing telemetry for your historian, as an example, right? It's a very difficult technical problem, because as soon as you've got a copy of the environment somewhere and you pull telemetry from a Yokogawa or a Siemens device, that data is now sitting with the wrong historian. And these two don't speak to each other because it's not a cluster, it's a test environment. Then how do you get the data back from data? It's a very complicated, very difficult thing. And maybe we should set up a group of people that can think about this a little bit better and come up with a solution for customers. It's above my mental capacity. I think we need more people to think about this,
So the issue of historian categorizing data, what I understood, right?
Yeah. So in my first few years of OT, my understanding was always that a historian is a passive device, collects data, and that's it. What I've experienced is that that's not true. If the historian is down and the PLC can't push data, normally there's a trigger on the PLC to shut the PLC process off, right? Why do I say this? Because remember I said in pharma, you need to be able to track the data from the beginning of the process to the end of the process. If the historian doesn't collect data, you can't have a body of evidence that traces across the whole area. So they stop the process until the network connectivity or the problem is resolved. Similar for tires. For tires, they've got something called the EUDR, which means the rubber needs to be traced from the tree to where you sell it. Now, that means every PLC in that production line, as they speak to the historian, all those tags are used to track it through the process. So if any of these PLCs can't see the historian or they can't see OPC UA, it shuts down. It's not a passive. Historian is not a passive log collection for some customers. It's live part of the system,
Interesting information. And
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So I mean, when you work for when you contract for pharma industry, do you do it like annually or a contract, an annual contract, or how does it work?
So that depends on what it is. Say I talk about the digitization where we connect PLCs. The customer has two methods of engaging us. The first one is he pays me per link, right? And that will include the cabling, it will include the PLC configuration, all that, right? What makes more sense is to take our service for a 6 months contract at a fixed rate, and we digitize as we can with a maximum rate, right? That means I'm on site for 6 months every day, going through the process with the teams to do the implementation. And as problems arise, you don't have to log new tickets or add new revenue to it. I can immediately speak to the IT team or to maybe the historian team and fix it while I'm there. That works quite well. If it's remote access projects, that's normally also a year project. If it's something like OT visibility, then that's normally not a contract. That would be a process, right? So they would pay me for a week or 2 weeks of work, and that's not that long. When we do compliance, like 62443 compliance, that's a long-term project. Normally customer has a yearly assessment. So working through that whole year to making as strong in that posture as possible. But yeah, I think a year would be the normal contract time, but most of our projects are currently sitting at about a 6-month contract.
Interesting. I saw you shared the topic about backing up a human HMI in your LinkedIn. Tell us about backing up adventures and you from your experience backing up HMIs or other devices.
Yeah. So first thing is that HMI architecture in pharma is diverse. You can either have HMI stream from your manufacturing execution system. You could have it stream from a server in the data center. You can have it stream from a PC sitting next to the robot. You can have it streamed from a PC, which is common to many robots, right? So first of all, the HMI architecture is difficult, okay? And this, I'm talking from a backup perspective, right? So you can back up maybe the HMI screen, but the data is somewhere else, right? So the data there gets corrupted, then your screen doesn't mean anything, right? So and then these HMIs are normally coded for Windows XP, Windows 7. It's pretty old HMIs that I normally see in the market. New ones are that I see that are very new. You get like a Raspberry Pi HMI and it's got like Linux on. That's okay. So where this complexity comes in, customers know that they have to back up IT resources. I'm busy convincing them to do backups for PLCs, not USB backups, automated, manual, testable backups, right? Then we go one step ahead and say, okay, we have to back up CCTV, access control, building management, shop floor printers, shop floor scanners, shop floor smart tools. Okay, that's cool. We can do some of that. Some of it's not practical, some of it's not necessary. Then the last thing is, what about the HMIs? Right? Where do they fit into this backup strategy that we've got? And a lot of customers neglect it. They don't back them up at all. And then when there's a problem, I mean, if you look at ransomware, if a plant has ransomware, they don't have conduiting and zoning, these HMIs will be first point of contact to be encrypted, right? But then the encryption can happen at multiple levels. It can happen at the physical screen, and it can happen wherever the stream comes from. And this becomes really difficult if those things haven't been backed up. Because now you can maybe get the PLC up and running, right? Because you can manage the PLC with SSH, you can manage it through something else, but your operator can't operate the machine. So backing up HMIs is super important. Not a lot of people are doing it. It's a weak point, and I think it's something that OT professionals can focus on,
Interesting. And were there like incidents that they had a problem with the HMI without backup?
Yeah. Look, and
you saw some incident. Oh.
I can give you a interesting example. We have a big customer which is in a we call it KwaZulu Natal. So this is a territory up north in South Africa. We spoke to them about doing HMI backups, PLC backups, robot controller backups, all these things, and they were interested, but it wasn't a priority, right? They didn't have compliance pressure. It was like nice to have, but this is budget for next year. Then there was a flood, right? 2 meters high mud came into the whole factory. The whole factory was destroyed. Okay, so they clean up the whole factory. They get some of the machines up and running. Most of the HMIs are destroyed physically, right? It costs them less money to implement new robots new HMIs, new factory, then it was going to cost them to go to all the different providers to get the PLC image, to get the PLC config, to get the HMI config, to get all these things back. And this was an act of God, right? This was not even a cyber attack. This was just like disaster recovery, pure plain disaster recovery. When it comes to cyber attacks, it's even worse, right? But yeah, so this is practically where we've kind of learned that it's very important that we have cradle to grave. When you have a backup strategy, it can't just be PLCs, can't just be historian and the rest of the IT infrastructure and OT. It needs to be HMIs, and it needs to be a priority.
Interesting. I mean, that's interesting. And do you think digital forensic has a role in OT security, especially in South Africa? Is it do some companies offer this, or are they in demand?
Not a lot. So we have some incident response tools that we use for different things, right? So if you want to take, if you don't use Version Dog or Octoplant or STA or Copia for PLC backup, there's some Microsoft incident response tools for PLCs that can pull the project files from the PLC, right? So it's an incident response tool which does that for incident response, but we use it for something else, right? If we think about incident response capabilities in country for OT, I would say no. Even if you look at the Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, these guys, they don't come into country and do incident response. It's very, very, we fly people in from Europe to do that. It's not something that we've got a strong competence on. So even though we use some of the tools, if you've got incident response, you need to be able to have like a chain of custody, and you need to work the data in a certain fashion. So those things, I think, is not something that we have good competence on. As I mentioned, our financial crime and cybercrime team is like two people, that are very focused, and it's very difficult for police services to get involved with industrial projects. Very difficult. It's even difficult for cyber professionals to understand what's happening right now. Imagine, it's difficult for police.
Okay. So, what do you advise people who cybersecurity people who want to work in OT security in pharma industries?
Look, I think the most important thing is to get yourself on the factory floor. That is the most important thing of everything, right? It's like, do whatever you need to do to be able to get on the factory so that you can look and you can see, and you can look at the operators, and you can look at the process, and you can understand that when you sit in a meeting room, best practices and policies and procedures are not always aligned with what's actually happening there. So that would be my point of advice. Make a friend, call someone that's in the industry, make yourself available to that specific function of security and OT, and just be in the plant and see things. That will really change your perception of how security needs to be implemented in pharma.
What if he has no job? He wants the job. What shall he do?
Yeah, look. So I did tutoring for edX or 2U, which is an educational company, some time back in the evenings, right? And this was pen testing, basically Security Plus and Pen Test Plus kind of curriculum for students, right? And then I always tell my students, listen, if you want a job, the first thing that you do is you go to Cisco and you do the free training, CCNA, right?
Okay.
Routing and switching, CCNA security. You go to Fortinet, you do the free Fortinet training, Fortinet security, Fortinet OT, right? Then you go to, there's 2 or 3 other free sources of education that you can put a badge on your LinkedIn profile, that you can start engaging people, right? Then I say to them, go and look at all of the OT vendors in your area. Is there a Fortinet? Is there a Nozomi? Is there a Clarity? Is there a Dragos? Is there a Forescout? Is there a Cisco? Add all of those people on LinkedIn, the partner managers, the sales managers, the engineer managers, the engineers. Build yourself an ecosystem of people in OT, Siemens, Yokogawa, ABB, all of these, right? Then start writing articles about OT. That's going to force you, that's going to force you to use your mind and apply that to something. Look, you can go to ChatGPT and say, write me something here about PLC backups. Everyone will see it. Everyone will know. We're not stupid. People can see, right? But if you really take the time to understand how PLC backups are being done now, who's the vendors in the space, what's the customer challenges, those things force you to have a understanding of the subject. Easy to tell a customer do PLC backups if you've never done it before. But if you've now written about it and you've kind of digged into it a little bit more, you understand it a little bit more, that helps a lot for you to understand a topic in OT. So it's get the free education, start writing about difficult articles, and then start seeing how you can get into factory environments. Look, if you look at a company like any pharma company, what type of jobs is there? There's process engineers, there's electrical engineers, right? There's about 2 or 3 other trade-related roles sitting in that OT area. There's no OT security people, right? Then on the IT side, there's network guys, security guys, operational guys, whatever the case might be, right? So if you want to be an OT specialist, it's very difficult to get into the customer. But you can get into the vendor. You can work for Cisco, you can use for Fortinet, you can work for Yokogawa, you can work for ABB, you can work for Siemens. You can work for a company like my company, which is an integrator, which does OT for customers. That's easy to get into, right? So if you can't get into the pharma customer directly, get into someone that services the pharma customer, right? So, and then if you can't do that, go to the OEMs that sell stuff that service the pharma customer. That would be kind of my advice, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is more flexible and practical advice, because most of them say, "Oh, you need a get experience 2-3 years." It's impossible for somebody who's just started. So your approach, I think, I like.
Yeah. You have to be practical about it as well. You know, it's also you have to compromise. If people say you need 3 years of experience, okay, but you have to start somewhere. Maybe you'll start on an IT-ish role, right? Maybe you'll start in a building management role. Maybe you'll start in a role which is not OT, but you work towards it. You know, that's, I think, is also important. People need to have the expectation that there's no OT security role which is easily available. There are companies that have it. Don't get me wrong, right? There are companies that have an OT security role, right? But there's not a lot of those positions available. You know,
not many. Yeah. What about HVAC system? Do you deal with them in pharma factories? HVAC systems?
Yeah.
You
So
deal with them, no?
building management is a real. So we clump building management, and HVAC is part of building management, and access control as 2 fundamental threat vectors to get into pharma, right? So when we do a scan on the process network, right, to see what's happening there, we always, after that scan, we cut that connectivity to the process network, we open it up to the CCTV and the building management network, right? So we can do risk profiling on that. Normally it's Honeywell. So Honeywell is probably the biggest building management supplier that we have. Sometimes it could be, there's some Schneider stuff that's also in there. But really fundamentally, those building management systems are quite interesting, because the HVAC that connects to the BMS, that BMS normally has password admin, and you can't change it, right? If it's the older version. Or not admin, but it's like Siemens 1 and whatever. You can read it, you can get it on the internet, right? And then sometimes you can't even change it. The newer ones you can change, of course. You know, they've got security in mind. But securing that HVAC system and that building management system and the access control system is just as important as securing your OT environment. Like I mentioned before, imagine you close all of the doors in the factory. No one can come in, no one can go out for 24 hours. Maybe someone will die. It's a very big problem, you know. Sounds like a simple thing, but it's a very big problem. Air conditioner, you cut the air conditioners, all of the product spoils, right? Because the tablets are made in a certain temperature to go through a certain process, and if the temperature is messed with, then it becomes a production issue.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, the easiest to attack methods, the access, the remote access, and the building management system.
Absolutely.
Yes, if the entity has those, then it's the easiest, I think, to get inside.
Absolutely, my friend.
Thanks, Andre. I really enjoyed talking with you. I mean, we can go on for hours. It's interesting to talk with you, really. Yes. Any final words you would like to say and share?
No, thank you, Dr. Suleiman. Thank you for the opportunity, I have to say to you. I just want to say thank you to Basim. I want to say thank you to to yourself, to Mike Holcomb, to all of the other OT professionals that share information, that are trying to get people into a state of readiness to support this industry. We literally, we are supporting civilization by making sure that critical infrastructure and industry stays where it's supposed to be. So it's a very big privilege to be part of this industry. And thank you to people like yourself that actively promote information in the space. That's all I want to say.
You're welcome, and it's really a pleasure to have you. I learned a lot from you today about the pharma factories. And despite me I visited the pharma industry twice, the pharma factory in Kuwait. But and I saw some things like exactly like the way you described it. It's so isolated and it's partitioned, like you mentioned, and I had to wear the those protective yes. And when I told him, okay, I want to see that, I want to go there, he said, no, you have to change, you have to add another one layer. And but when I agreed, they made one condition which is very difficult for me. They said, we cannot let you in now, even if you wear additional layer, because your hair is long and you have a long beard. So we have a quality control that's no hair should be long hair should get inside. So I said, really, even if I wear a mask? Because he said, no, you have a long beard and a long hair, so you cannot proceed. So I said, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to keep my beard short,
Yeah,
but Dr. Salomon,
yes.
it's interesting how culture also plays into so many of these things, But I mean, it'd be a big privilege to speak to you about automotive as well, maybe even mining when you've got time.
Yes.
But pharma, I think it's a good market to be in. I would advise junior OT specialists to see this as a possible market that they want to skill themselves in.
Interesting. Yes, I mean we should make an episode once about mining.
Okay.
I haven't had a guest. I haven't had any guest about mining really. I mean, South Africa seems interesting. It has so many industries.
most of the gold that is available on the planet today has been mined from South Africa. Yeah, it's interesting. Wow. So we can have a very interesting session on that. Yeah, whenever you're ready, let me know.
Yeah, so maybe we can buy gold too. So
absolutely.
Yes,
the time is right.
Yes. Thank you, Andre. Really, I thank you for being on ICIS Arabia podcast. So this is
thank you so much.
Sure. So this is the end, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.